Well, I can't tell you the date, but it was in December of '52, I think. I got a telephone call that there was going to be a meeting at the town hall in the upstairs building of the building there. And the gentleman lived right next door to it, Rose, I forget his last name. And the purpose of it was to tell us what had happened. A well-to-do man in town left $500, not left, donated $500 to the town of Scarborough to do whatever they wanted to do, and $500 to Cape Elizabeth. Well, the people here in Scarborough said, well, let's wait and see what Cape Elizabeth does. And I had in my mind, I'd like to have a Camp Scarborough, Camp Hines in Scarborough. That was my intent. And I had been up in this land hunting several times. So I brought up buying this piece of land. They said, you can't buy that with the $500. Well, I called Harold Huntley and got his wife. She said he's up there cleaning up his final cleanup of getting out of the lot. So I walked right into the lot, and I found him, and I says, you interested in selling this place? And he says, nobody will buy it. And I says, yes, somebody will buy it. I said, the Boy Scouts would love to buy this piece of land. And he said, how much can you give me? And I said, $325. He said, you sure? And I says, yeah. I wasn't sure what the rest of the committee might do, because there was 2 or 3 that were against buying land. And I brought it up at the meeting, and we had a meeting right away, and I told them I could buy it for $325. They said, we'll buy it. Imagine 26 acres, I think it was. They said, now we have a problem. We don't have access to it off the Beach Ridge Road. And so I hunted around, and Henry Milliken's owned 5 acres that didn't have any value at all. It wasn't big enough to build a house on or anything else. And I went to him and I says, how much did it take for that 5 acres? And he says, what's it for? And I said, the Scouts want to buy it. He says, how much you give me? And I says, $125. He says, I'll take it. So then we owned all that land there. Well, my intent was, and we put a lot of effort into it, was to excavate the brook and make a pond. In fact, I went far enough to have the National Guard come out and survey, and they showed me right the height that they could have the water table with the dam in that, where the ravine is. And it went on a few weeks, and they says, Saturday we'll come out. We'll have a culvert. They were going to put a culvert to keep the natural flow of the brook amount of water, but they were going to have upright, I think it was 6 feet. The water would come in and down and out. And they were coming out with a bulldozer, and they were going to bulldoze that and make a pond there. Nobody showed up, except the Boy Scouts. We had a bunch of boys there. We had been in and cleaned that complete area for a pond. We were going to have skating, canoeing, and things like that. Now, I'll back up a little. The main thing was I loved to go to Camp Hines, but I couldn't afford it. I was a bus driver for the Town of Scarborough for peanuts. I had 4 children, or 3 children, I guess, at the time. And I had this in the back of my mind. and it didn't pan out. And I tried and tried and tried to get a dam there. And there's where the bridge was, went across right there, was a perfect place to put the culvert and the upright and the whole thing. It was all planned out. That fizzled, and I've been discouraged ever since. But the main reason I wanted to buy some land for scouts was to have a Camp Hines in Scarborough without going to Camp Hines, because that's an expense. And we've owned the land and done pretty good with it. And I hope the town will hang on to it forever for the purpose of mine was Boy Scouts naturally, but it should be the youth, I suppose, of the town of Scarborough. That's probably the best I can give you on, unless you got some other questions.
How about some of the other men that were involved, like Vern Paulson? And
Vernon Paulson was against it. Wendell Witten was in favor of it. Ernest Moulton and I did all the running.
Yeah.
And we accomplished it anyway. And to think that that was bought for less than $500. What's it worth today?
Yeah. Did you build the cabin?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
I didn't have anything to do with it. That was after my time.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was, if I could interject a couple
Yeah,
of things, it was
anything.
In conjunction with the work that he talked about the basin and wanting to build a pond down there. They also, the committee, had another donation given to them, and it was a Perry Village unit that was over to South Portland. I don't know if anybody even knows where Perry Village was over to South Portland, but it's a military housing. And Eldred Harmon and I'm not sure who else was involved in moving one of those units onto the site, and that was on the site on the side of the brook towards the West Beach Ridge Road, beyond the north side of the lock. There was a foundation laid. I think Cliff Bowser was involved.
Cliff Bowser bought the concrete blocks and laid the blocks and set the building on it.
Is that Joe's father?
That's Neil's father.
Neil's father. Yeah.
Neil's father.
Joe's grandfather.
He lived down at Pine Point, well, Blue Point, actually.
Right. Yeah.
So that was another piece. There was a building on site for a number of years that was used by the Boy Scouts also, especially if they had winter camping and they had a situation where they felt the boys ought to be better served inside of a building.
Yeah, we could go up and stay overnight. We had a stove, we had a table, we had cooking there.
And it was burned down, or?
Well, there was a number of fires that occurred in it. There was a number of break-ins that happened. But in its life, it was used a lot.
Yeah.
In the life that it was there. And then
Our
finally,
boys used it a lot.
yeah, finally it got to the point that it was in such disrepair that it wasn't worth going through all the rehab to put it back together. So worked with the fire department and burnt the rest of it down. There's another piece that goes along with this in history of Camp Scarborough. Was a piece of land owned by the Boy Scouts of Scarborough. I'll digress just for a second. There was another town that was involved in this donation, okay? And you might tell them what the other town chose to do with their money.
They spent their money sending kids to Camp Hines until it was gone.
Oh, yeah. Which town was that?
Cape
Cape Elizabeth.
Oh, that was
so
the one, yeah.
there was two donations that occurred.
Yeah.
And Cape Elizabeth chose to use the money to send the boys to Camp Hines. And so it was used for a short period of time by a small group of boys, and that was the end of it. In fact, there was a lot of effort. Once Scarborough got their site, Camp Scarborough, up and operating, that there was a lot of interest starting to be developed of others that wanted to come here. In fact, the district, at one point, the committee had to get the district involved because there was issues regarding insurance, liability insurance. And if I'm saying anything out of turn, or you can explain it.
Yeah, there's something that probably should be on it too. When it comes to final discussion of scouts owning land, now you got to pay taxes, you got to pay insurance. Are you going to be able to do it? And we decided we couldn't. So the only thing we could do was turn it over to the town, which was done, as the understanding it would be for scouts. And I still think a lot of it myself because I put so much effort into it.
Well, the town, the district also, at one point, was trying to get their hands on it.
Yeah.
This is the Casco Bay District.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the committee approached the town because they'd rather keep it for the Boy Scouts in Scarborough. And the issue that happened, that took place then is the elected officials in the town, at that point, were selectmen, I believe, chose that they didn't want it to be turned over to the town for the Boy Scouts. So the name had to be broadened, and if you look at all the information about Camp Scarborough, it's for the youth of Scarborough. Now, a lot of people think it's solely Boy Scouts, but if you look at the agreements and look at all the information, it's very clear that it's for the youth of Scarborough. That's how it wound up, finalized, being turned over to the town. And then the requirement was that there had to be a committee formed, and they had to keep a membership with elected, like the president, having annual meetings, and then the dollar had to be given on a yearly basis. That is a 99 year lease.
That's what it was
That
originally.
it wound up
99
being
year
back
lease.
to
I hope
Camp
it's
Scarborough.
forever. Not even going to be here that long.
Well, we're halfway through it, believe it or not. It's about
Yeah.
right, or a little more than half.
Yeah. a
So
little
what
more
year
than
did you say?
I think it was 52 when we bought it, well,
52,
53
yeah.
probably.
More than
that. It may have been just a few more years after that the realization of issues of ownership
Yeah.
took place. So, that's a lot of what took place way back then. So if you look at all the land that was the Huntleys, that was on the south side of the brook, remained wild. In other words, there was no buildings over there. Time transpired, and there was interest later on, and I can't tell you what year, and there was a number of lean-tos built, the Appalachian-style lean-tos. Back, I'm going to say in the mid-70s, the committee became a lot more active and decided that they wanted to do more work on that south side. So some of those lean-tos that were originally built were torn down. And the National Guard got involved again, only this time they did get involved. They built the lean-tos that you just finally tore down, and I'm saying mid-70s. It could have been as late as in 1980, but it's in that ballpark. So they built that ring of Appalachian-style lean-tos, and they built the picnic, or the area where you could get undercover if you was having an event up there. Picnic tables, they had a lot of picnic tables and stuff like that. And they built the bridge across the brook. If you want an experience, you want to get involved with the National Guard when it comes to building a bridge. Because of liabilities, the original plan was that we were going to have to find 12 by 12 timbers. We're going to have construction equipment come in and put in cement bases. There was just an unbelievable amount of work that they wanted us to do. In fact, Foley was involved in that whole process back then. And I just said, you know, to Foley, there's no way. There's no way. I have built, or been involved in building a number of snowmobile bridges over the years, and with my history and background of what I did for work, I said there's a lot better and easier way that we can do this. And we finally got the right engineers to meet us on site, and that's where the bridge design that was, and recently torn down, developed from. So they got involved in the last series of construction that was done on the site.
So they actually built it with your design,
Yeah,
Not the
basically,
road, yeah.
basically, it was compromised. There was some things that they wanted to add to it that I didn't object to. There was timbers they wanted to put back into the banks, and we worked that out, we got those. And it was basically, it was all telephone poles, light poles. It was donated by Central Maine. And, you know, if you're gonna do some of this stuff, you gotta get out there and rattle the cages and see where you can get it for the cheapest, because if you're gonna think you're gonna raise the money to build a bridge that just the material list then was over $5,000.
really?
I mean, the railing system was astronomical, but it got built, and it was used for many years, many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I get too much that I could add to it, other than the area that Henry Milliken sold to the committee was designated at one time. Those are going to be athletic fields. There's going to be baseball fields and a can't tell you the name of it. Staging area. In the military, they call it a reviewing parade ground. Right, very similar. So that if there was an event went on up there, the kids could all march over and display their flags and so on and so forth. And it was also going to be used for athletics.
And that lot is right off the turnaround at the end of Beach Ridge?
Yeah,
West
it's
Beach
up the road from the paved part, probably 150 feet, maybe 200. It doesn't butt to the turnaround on the West Beach Ridge Road.
I still can't see how the town could discontinue that when the town actually owns land there. Now you can't drive to it.
Yeah, that was back in the
the
early
timbers.
80s. We never could
Rough
understand
deal.
why they made the land landlocked.
That fell into a group of county roads that were discontinued in 1947. Actually, it goes back that far.
Huh.
There was another group, yes, I'm very familiar with the ones in the 80s because I was involved in discontinuing a lot of them in the city of Portland. So that particular road, if you look at it, the West Beach Ridge Road, it starts at Beach Ridge Road and actually stops at King's Stand on the county road. It's the same road. Mitchell's Hill,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
take that, if you look at it, it
Yeah, yeah.
actually was at one time,
yeah.
way back, that was a continuous road.
So it was the county road that was discontinued like others are.
Yep. So the abutters then owned to the center of the road. And I know there's issues right now going on with another piece of land just above the Scout lot that is trying to gain access. And
Yeah, she's got a landlocked piece, it's, what, 5 acres or 2 acres?
yeah, but however she got it, and from my understanding, she bought it, she knew it was landlocked.
Yeah.
I mean, the abutting properties would have more interest in that than than an individual property owner. But something's going on right now, and I know you've got a request in, I saw the minutes about a snowmobile club. I don't know if somebody's here from the snowmobile club tonight or not, but you probably ought to touch base with Ken Rowski and Bud Grant.
Yeah, they've already applied for that, the largest parcel owner of all that, what is formerly the West Beach Ridge Road. So when that got abandoned, that process started in the 40s and probably got finished up, we think, around 52. So Mrs. Grant, Ruth Grant, the teacher that we all remember, her son and daughter still own that. I think it's, what, 160-acre parcel, maybe 125. So if you were to go up what used to be the West Beach Ridge Road, like Bruce said, that all was, when that road was discontinued, those, half of it, they would go right down the middle, so anybody on this side got that piece, and subsequently, I think even the Scouts or the town own that, you know, a small section over there, so they have posted it now. It hadn't been in the past, so it got shut off on us late this season, probably in March, I think, towards end of February, first part of March, I think. It got posted as being shut down. I don't know if they'll reopen it for snowmobile use only. If not, it's gonna shut most of that right down completely to get out to the power lines and whatnot, because basically you can go from here to Freiburg if the snow and everything's frozen, and put a lot of effort into it since I came back home in '05, so rebuilding one of the bridges behind Billy Thames before you got to West Beach Ridge Road, redid the some bridge repair out on the other side of Fenger where it abuts Fuller Field property, which is part of a land conservation trust. So I know in talking to somebody that knows Glenn, Eric Berry, seemed to think the main reason for shutting it down is some of the four-wheelers and dirt bikes through there, and then there was some either property damage or some missing property at the Grant residence there. So we're gonna have to kind of wait and see what happens there.
They've got kind of a bit of taste about some of the activities that have taken place on their property, with people invading their privacy, and there's been break-ins.
Yeah.
There has been break-ins.
Yeah. And that's not right. People should respect other
No,
folks.
but typically, look, that's how things happen. That, because of people's attitudes and how they're treating other people's private property, people just throw their hands up after a while. And I know they've spent quite a bit of money to develop the closure that they want to have occur. That means that they're serious about it.
Yeah.
And they
they hired an attorney to do that.
Well, it's like Camp Scarborough, the vandalism there for years,
Oh.
just, you know, was awful. Destroying that footbridge, you know, piece by piece. It was
I'd
just-
never seen it prior to. I walked through there February, I guess it was, and the only thing left now are the two telephone poles that go straight across.
Yeah. Yeah, I give you a quick story about the bridge. It had already been vandalized quite a bit up to this point when I got a call from Ken Rowski that there was some kids lugging timbers out of the scout lot. And I went up, and sure enough, they were.
You caught
And
it.
I knew who they were. They knew who I was. And the bottom line of it is what they were taking out had already been pretty much just thrown down over towards the brook. And anybody that's been in there knows it's a heck of a climb up over that bank. They were building a project down at their house. I'll let it go at that in not naming them, but what I made them do as a result was take everything out, pile it up beside the road so the town could come and get it. And those kids, believe me, they were scared to death, number one. Number two, they were willing to do anything so that nothing would happen. And they worked their butts off. I mean,
They carry it back to West Beach Ridge Road or
West
back
Beach
on the
Ridge.
other? I was
No,
gonna
no,
say,
no.
if they pick
That,
it the
the other
way,
development,
wow.
the other development hadn't happened yet. And they lugged it all out to the West Beach Ridge Road, and they cleaned up everything, and I finally went in about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and these kids looked like they'd been playing in a campfire or something. They were black, they were just dirty, dirty, dirty. And when I went in and looked at the site, everything was picked up. They did a super job. And I took them back out to the road, and I looked at the pile, and I said, okay, boys, here's the deal. I don't want to see this pile spread all over. I want to see it maintained. If what we can agree on, I'll let you do. And what's that? And I says, now, you want to do something down to your property, and your parents seem to be willing for you to do it. Yeah. I said, you can have everything you want. Just whatever you don't want, make sure it's in a nice, neat pile. I says, but I will be up here tomorrow with somebody from the town, and whatever's left will be gone. I talked to the father afterwards, because I didn't go up until the next morning, and the pile was considerably less. And he said the kids finished about 11 o'clock.
Wow.
So that's the story of how the bridge,
Yeah.
the bridge issue got solved. But so many of the things that happen up there, you know, this is how things got accomplished, you know. We tried to keep the Perry Village unit and we did for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And then finally it just got to the point, I don't know how many times we went up there and repaired it, but they were cutting holes in the floor, they were cutting holes in the
Oh, yeah.
roof.
We tipped over the outhouse a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're lucky we kept the picnic shelter in good shape all these years, because they were burning picnic tables and,
Yeah.
yeah.
They went up inside and built that platform up on top
Yeah.
of the beams.
Oh, well, this has been great. Hard to believe it. All these years have passed, Al. You made a
Yeah.
good decision back then.
Yeah, my wife was, his mother was some tickle when I got out of scouting. I
It's a
had,
common experience.
I get to brag. I had, I think, the best explorer post in the state of Maine. And we did things, we just did things. And
But we
there was
weren't
the
everybody.
fire department at Pleasant Hill finally was a sponsor. There was a guy in the fire department one night at the meeting, and he says, I'd love to be running this Explorer post. And I said, yeah. And it didn't last a year.
Yeah.
It didn't care for it. The
Oh, it's
kids,
like John DuFonette. When he ran the troop for, I don't know, how many years was John Scoutmaster?
22 years.
Yeah,
47
and that's
years.
when I think Camp Scarborough got its most use, and then when he finally called it quits, you know, things changed.
I don't know
Moved over
about that, but I will tell you that back in the earlier years, it was not unusual to see 50 to 60 boys at Camp Scarborough,
Yeah,
really. And they were, each troop had its own designated area on the south side of the brook. And the explorers had the last one, all the way down to the further end. And I've been up there when there was one, had a couple of pile of kids up there.
yeah,
And they really enjoyed it. I think learned a lot.
it's great.
yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. Just got to use it, that's all.
Yep. Well, and now that there's access, I think we'll find, hopefully, that younger scouts can use it, because they can get vehicles in there and do, you know, day camps or whatever. I mean, the access was a real problem, because for little ones, they just couldn't do it. And when we lost the bridge, that made it even harder. So I think, as much as it's hard to see the houses right around it, you know, at
I
least
think
we've got
that's-
access.
I think that soccer club maybe. I think it'd be beneficial to put it back in.
Now, so the original access never came from Broadturn Road, it always came from the West Beach Road?
Correct.
Because they're interested in snowmobile.
Correct.
Right,
See, before snowmobiles couldn't come across it.
Yeah.
Because they put these posts in it just so they could.
right.
We, when we had the National Guard come in and do big building that's there, just the roof, and the shelters. We couldn't, they wouldn't let us come in from,
Oh,
on the
the other
Huntley side, they wouldn't let us go in that side.
Yep.
So I talked with Dickie Waterhouse, and we came in through his property and down to the Scout Lot, because the road on the other side wasn't bad, but that, down over the hill where Dickie's road is,
Yeah.
that's quite a hill.
And when you say it's Huntley, so was that like Sonny Huntley's
Right.
folks? Yeah.
Right, because Sonny's gone now, but,
Yeah.
yeah. Sonny was pretty adamant about not letting you have access through there. I don't know what would happen now, because his wife still lives down there.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much for coming. The Historical Society wants this tape. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Good. Well, the Bells have done a lot for this town over the years, and I don't know if anyone knows, Bruce was Public Works Director for how many years in Portland?
You've given me a higher title
Oh,
than I
yeah.
really was. But anyway,
Okay.
I was Superintendent of Operations,
Right.
29 years.
29 years, yeah.
Yep.
Great history.